Now, today is the second day, and I don't want to be talking too much so that we can achieve quite a lot. So if you remember yesterday, we stopped right here where we created our first class. And if you haven't downloaded Visual Studio, please go ahead and download Visual Studio, have it set up and create your first project, just like we did here yesterday. And I also noticed that a few people asked some questions on the live channel yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't have my eyes on there, but Ike is monitoring that. So if any questions do pop up, please either kindly put it on the channel or, ask those questions later on towards the end of the training. And I can see someone asking a question. Are there any YouTube channels that you would recommend for beginners? Absolutely. We can talk about that later on, just not to digress too much, but there are so many of them. Now, at the top of my head, I know there is a channel called Day2 Training. It's been on YouTube for a little while. And there is also another guy called Kartik. He's a fantastic guy. I think he's based in Australia. He's got loads and loads of resources on YouTube. Actually, let me quickly dig that up for you. I mean, there's so many of them, but I feel like there's a few channels that you can, let me see, automation, let's say with C# by Kartik. I'm not sure how you spell the Kartik. Okay, Execute Automation, that's it. So this guy called Execute Automation, he's got loads and loads of videos. So what you want to do is go to his channel and you will see a lot of videos right here. I mean, spanning from 3, 4, 5 years ago, from 6 years ago. There's so many of them. Now, he's got a couple of different languages. There's Java, there's C#, there's, I believe, is it JavaScript? So, but he's one of those on YouTube that I can vouch for. So I think there's another one called Pro Training, Selenium C#. So right here is another one. If you go to Pro Training, I believe they've got C# and Java as well. So all the resources are here. If you need me to paste it on the channel, I can do so. But for now, let's quickly get to the business of the day, so that we don't waste much time. So yesterday, like I said, we made a start, we created a project, and we started doing we wrote our first code to automate. Obviously, the first thing that happened here was to open a browser and navigate to a URL. And I did explain to us yesterday that before you can create the object of your class, you want to first of all add the API package that is required for opening a browser. And that API package is called Selenium. So right here, we added the one that says selenium.support. And to add your API package, you want to right-click on the project and go to Manage NuGet Packages. And another window will open. Then you want to go to Use to identify each component on the page using one of those locator strategies. And we did mention again that we do have about 7 or 8 locator strategy. One called ID, another one called name, another one tag name, another called class. I believe there is CSS, selector, there's experts, and there is link text, there is partial link text, partial link text. Yeah, I think that's everything right there. So I also mentioned yesterday that sometimes you don't necessarily need all of them. Stick with the ones that you're used to, and obviously, as long as it works for you, then use that. So for this example, I'm going to quickly go over to the URL that we're about to automate, and I will see what we have over there. So here's the URL that we are working with. And to identify any component on this page, what you want to do is to right-click anywhere on this page. If you right-click and select the keyword inspect. Sorry, let me mute you there. Sorry. So you want to right-click on the page and select inspect. And this will open this area of the browser called the HTML DOM. Now, in this HTML DOM, this is where you are going to identify anything on the page, any component whatsoever. And to do that really quickly, what you want to do is to click on this inspect icon. If you click on it, or the select icon rather, and if you move your mouse anywhere on the page, you can see what's happening on the page. And then you want to really focus on the exact elements or components that you want to identify or interact with. And for me, the first thing I want to interact with is the text input. So since the field is what I want to interact with, I'm going to focus my mouse on there and click on it. And watch what's going to happen in the HTML DOM, which is the right-hand side. It's going to highlight the right-hand side of the HTML DOM to tell me that this is the exact point where I need to focus on to be able to identify the elements. So I'll click on it. And can you see right here, there is a blue background color around this area. And if you move your mouse up and down, you can see what's happening on the left-hand side. So right here, this is where I want to focus on. And if you go back to Visual Studio, we did say we have a couple of locator strategy. And what this means is back on the browser. Now, the first bit on the HTML DOM is known as the tag names. So I'm talking about inputs. Can you see where my mouse is hovering on? Inputs, label, div, form. These are called tag names, right? The first one at the top, HTML, head, body, they are all tag names. And immediately after that, the first thing you see immediately after that, take for instance, type. This is called the attribute, right? And after type, we have equals text. The value text is the value, and you can see that the colors are slightly different. The tag names are dark bluish in color, while the attributes are light bluish, while the values are orange. Now, it might look slightly different on yours, but this is what it looks like on mine. So it helps me to understand clearly what I'm going for. If it's a tag name I need, I can quickly grab the tag name. If it's an attribute I need, I can quickly grab it. And if it's the value I need. And as part of our locator strategy, we are saying that the locator strategy that we want to use right here, the first one says ID. So that means on the HTML DOM, you want to look for an attribute called ID. Can you see right here? So the first thing you're doing is use your selector, identify the component you want to interact with, and look in that selection to look for ID. So I can see there's an ID here, so I'll quickly select it. And I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. And what I want to type right here is, I'll say driver.find an element. So there is a method written by Selenium called find element. And that method is what we are going to use to identify the component which we are about to type into right now. So I'll say by.id. And then I will paste the locator there and I'll put a semicolon. Now, what have I done here? I have identified an element, right? The actual locator is this, which is by ID. And I found the locator here in the HTML DOM, as you can see right there, ID, my text ID. Hence why I have this by.id. Now, if I'm going to be using another one here called name, my text, then I will be changing this by to a by name. I hope this makes a bit of sense. So in the meantime, what we are using right now is by ID. So I will stick with ID, and then bear in mind that this is an element. And what majority of people do is to go ahead and perform the action directly using the element. So they will do something like dot, and they'll call another method called send keys. And send keys is a method which Selenium has written for us. And what they are trying to do with the send keys is to type a value into it. If you hover on this method, send keys, it says if you put in a string text, you'll be able to type a value using this method, send keys. So I'm going to put a text value here to say, I'll just put my name there as Joseph. So what I'm expecting is that Joseph will be typed into where it says text input right here. And I'll do the exact same thing for password. I want to move a little faster so that we can cover a bit today. So the next thing I'm doing is using the selector again. Click on the password input field, and I'm going to look right here. Can you see I don't have ID right here? So the only thing I have on the list here is name equals my password. So I'm going to copy that name value. I'll go to my Visual Studio, and I'll do the exact same thing again to say driver, the find element, and I'll say by dot name, and I'll paste the locator right there. And then I'll perform the action immediately after that to say send keys of, I'll say my secret password, something like that. And that's it. So if I run this test right now, definitely both of them will be actioned and you will see those values being typed in there. So I'm going to run the test. Always make sure you save your changes as you're writing your codes. So you can see the browser opened and I did not see anything. Did anyone see it? What I'll do, I'll put a breakpoint here, and then I will run the test again in debug mode. Now you might be asking, why am I putting a breakpoint? This area here that is showing red, this is called a breakpoint. You can click anywhere along this border here to put a breakpoint. Now, what we use breakpoints for are to help us to figure out step by step what we are doing so that we can make corrections as we, walk along. So I'm putting a breakpoint in line number 16 here, and I'm going to open my Test Explorer, right click, and instead of clicking the run button, I will click debug. So breakpoints work with debug as opposed run. So I'll click debug, and the same thing is expected. A browser will open, and then it will stop in line number 16. Nothing else will happen. It will just stop in line number 16. So here is my browser right here, and you can see the yellow background color highlighting line number 16 right there. That's telling us that this is where it stopped. So what I want to do to be able to proceed, I can step over from line number 16 to move to line number 18. So gradually I'll step over step by step by clicking this button here. This blue button here is called step over, or you can use your F10 key on your keyboard. But if you click the continue button, it's just going to run through the test and finish it off immediately. But for now, I'm going to use this button right here to step over. And you see that it will count to 3 seconds and then it will stop in line number 18. So, and the reason why I stopped in line number 18 is because we are running it in debug mode. So provided we've put a breakpoint here, it's going to allow us do it step by step until we make sure that what we've done is absolutely correct. So now I'll step over again. And can you see line 18 has been executed, is now in line 19. And our expectation is that the first value has been entered. So Joseph has been typed here, which corresponds with the value Joseph, which I entered there. And the second one we're expecting is for it to type my secret password. Please don't mind the misspelling. I'll step over again, and then you see my password has been entered there. Now you can see how easy it is to interact with a component on a page, a component such as an input field. This, you can interact with them if and only if you know the exact way to interact with them. And Selenium has provided this already for us. The page, the website I opened yesterday for selenium.dev, they already informed us that we can use driver.find element, which is the one I've highlighted right now. Now, all you need to do is to identify which locator strategy you want to use to identify that element. And in this case, we're identifying it via ID. And then we pasted the ID value from what we copied here in the HTML DOM right there. And the second one, we are identifying by name. And by name, we copied it right here. Okay. And then the next thing we are trying to do is quit the browser. So I'm just going to step over, and you see that as soon as I click the step over, the browser will shut down. Can you see that? The browser shut down immediately, and I can just finish off my test. And that's the end of that particular test. Now, is there a different way that you can do this? Absolutely. Now, this is the quickest way that a lot of people has been doing it, but some people can obviously can save their elements into a variable. And from saving it into a variable, they can then use their variable name to perform an action. How do they do that? What they do is they'll write something like iWeb elements, and they'll call it iWeb elements text inputs. And they'll use this variable name to call the sendKeys method. And they'll do the exact same thing for the password. So I'll put 1 here, and I'll change the variable name into password. Now, remember the fundamentals of C# that we're talking about. This is where it becomes useful. We are creating a variable, or we are using a variable to represent an object, and we are saving this information into the variable so that we can use it to perform more actions later on. Okay, so I'll just close that off and use the variable right here. And this is what it will look like for some people. Now, are there advantages to creating a variable? Absolutely, because you can use it to perform multiple actions. Multiple actions such as this. Let's take, for instance, I can use text input to first do a click action. And I'm doing a click action here. Why? Because I want to be sure that I have identified the correct component. Hence why if I click the input field, then I would then do a type by running this to do a send keys. But you don't necessarily need it. It's just that I'm trying to use it to explain to you that you can use it to perform multiple actions. I hope this makes sense. So if I run it again, you see that it will do exact same thing that I did before. No differences at all. And then another reason why we use variables is so that in the long run, towards when we are running our test, we might need to use the information that is coming from this element right here. We might need to use it. And as a result, we can use the variable down the line in our code. Now, that's advanced level. But in the meantime, let's take it step by step so that we can all understand it a little bit more clearer. So that's the first two components that we've identified. And the next one we want to identify is the text area. So I'm going to use my selector again, identify, and you can see it highlighted here. And you can see now we have an attribute called name and my text area. I'll copy that and I'll go here. I'll type again, iWeb elements. I'll call it text area. And I'll say equals driver.find elements. Now your driver is like your eye, right? What your eye sees on the page. So your eyes will look around, identify the component, and then it wants to identify it with one specific locator strategy. And that locator strategy is by .name. And when I say by .name, I will go to the HTML DOM to identify which attribute in the HTML DOM is a name. I will copy that attribute and I'll bring it over here and paste it. And then I have created an element, right? After creating the element, I will use the variable text area to perform an action. Again, what action do I want to perform? Is send keys. So I want to type. That's why I'm using send keys. But if I want to click, I'll select the one that says click. And right there, I'm just going to type something. I will say, welcome, everyone. And there you go. Again, if I run the test, you will see, make sure you save your changes. If I run the test, you will now see that all the three components, we have succeeded or successfully interacted with all of them. I hope you saw that. It was very quick, but let me copy this thread of sleep and put it down here, so that after typing all of those information, then after 3 seconds, you see it, and after 3 seconds, the browser will shut down. So I'll save my changes and run the test again. So browser has opened, and can you see it has typed in all those, and after 3 seconds, the browser shut down. Now, another thing that you will notice is when the browser opens, it's opened in a size that is not occupying the entire screen. Now, we want to be able to see what we are doing properly. We want to see it maximized. Hence, we can also use our code to maximize the browser. All right. So to do that, we can come right here at the very top after creating the object. Now, remember, we also talked about control flows yesterday. No, right here. So you want to be able to determine what line of code should come immediately after another line of code. Now, since we've opened our browser here, right? Since we've opened our browser, the next thing we want to do is to maximize the browser. And to maximize the browser, what we want to do is driver dot, I believe it's manage dot windows dot maximize. So that line of code is going to use the driver to go into the settings area of the driver, identify it as a window, and make it bigger or maximize the screen. And then if I run the test, you now see that it's going to maximize. So it will open the browser, then it will go full screen. Can you see that? Then, typed in, interacted with all the elements, and now the browser shut down. So that's a good start for us right now. We've been able to interact with 3 different components. And the next thing here is you want to be able to decide if you want to interact with each of the elements one by one, or you want to interact with them using one locator to kill so many, or to interact with so many of them. Now, it's a choice that you have to make, right? In the meantime, since you're just learning from scratch, you can go ahead and identify them one by one. And I can quickly run through that right now while you watch me. And then we can refactor it in such a way that we can use one locator to identify all of them. So I'll come back on the page, and I want to quickly identify this dropdown. So in the meantime, we've been interacting with the input fields. We now want to interact with these drop-down elements such that either we click the drop-down and select, or we can just directly select from the drop-down. So if I use my selector again, let's identify the locator. And here I have something here called set name. So I'm just going to copy that and go over to Visual Studio. And I'll say iWeb elements. I'll say drop down equals driver.find elements by .name. Paste that right there. And then I'll say drop down dots. I can use a send key directly. And the reason why I can use send keys directly to select from a drop down is because the tag name of a drop down, if it is a select, please remember this. If your drop down, the tag name is select, you can use send keys to select any value from that drop down. So if I click this drop down, can you see there is 1, 2, 3, which is the same thing here in the HTML DOM. So after the select tag, you see open the select menu 1, 2, and 3. So I'll go back to Visual Studio, and what I want to select, let's say I select 2, which is the second on the list, right? And let's see if that works. So I'll go back again to my Test Explorer, right click and run the test. So the browser opened, and can you see that it has selected 2 right there, just using a send keys. Now, is there a different way to do that? Absolutely. Although this is how a lot of people has been doing it previously, whether it is a select tag or not, but this is a quicker way that most people do it right now. Just use the send keys, and that should work. Now, let's not get into the other way of doing this select drop down. There is a lot of information out there that you can look at to be able to learn that, how to select from drop down. I'll move on to the next one. So we want to select from a data list. So if I click on there, you can see a list of information right here. The first and most important thing you want to do again is select. Use your select, identify the locator, and here I have a name. I'll use name again. And I'll just quickly copy this line of code and change the name to data lists. And then I'll copy the locator, which is by name, and I'll put it right here. So as you can see, as I'm adding different lines of code, the codes are getting bigger and bigger. Imagine if your scenario journey allows you to do multiple things as part of that test. There's going to be, a lot more code written in here. But this is how it all starts from. If you can do one, you can do so many, right? So what I want to select or identify here is, let's say, Chicago. I'll type Chicago here. Yeah, and I'll quickly identify the rest of them. Let's say, actually, let me show you this. To upload a file, we can identify the locator as well. And we have a name, my file. I'll copy that. And I'll quickly paste that right here. Copy, you know what, let me just do this and call this file. And go back and copy the locator. And I'll replace this. And then the file which I want to upload, I can upload any file whatsoever from my laptop. Now, the downside of that is that it's only going to work perfectly fine on my machine, which is my laptop. But if you copy this project and move it over to your own laptop, this particular locator, the file is not going to be uploaded and you're going to be getting error. And the reason is because the file only exists on my machine because of the paths at which I'm going to use. So I've gone ahead before starting this training to add a folder here, and I've just added a sample file. So what I'll do, I will right click and copy full path, right? And I'm just going to paste that full path here. Now, can you see what the full path looks like? It says C user. So it's basically trying to identify, let me show you what the view looks like here. So it says user. So you have to start from C drive. And I'll come over here to C drive. And then the next thing is user folder. I'll come over to user. And the next one, which is my user profile, Joey, and after that is source. I'll look for source right here on the list. So as you can see, there's source right there. I'll click on it. And then I'm looking for repos. That's repos there. I'll click on it. I'm looking for a masterclass test automation folder. That's the masterclass test automation folder. I'll double click on it. There is another folder inside the masterclass test automation folder called test data. Can you see this is where the test data is? I'll double click on it again. And immediately after that, we have a file inside the test data folder called file.txt, right? So that's the part that it's going to copy the file from and upload it on the page that we are trying to interact with. I'm going to run the test now so you can see that it works. And then I'll show you a different way that you can use it or write your code where it's going to work for both your machine and it's going to work for someone else on their own machine. So let's run the test. Let me make this a little bit longer so that we can see it clearly. 5 seconds. I'll right click and run my test. So we're expecting the browser to open, and there you go. You can see it's open. Now, I don't see the data list. So it looks like the data list did not work. I didn't see this one. Oh yeah, the file looks like it worked. Let me put a breakpoint here somewhere so we can see what's happening. I'll save my changes, right click, debug. Because I want to be sure that it's working. Now, it's not just about seeing your test pass. You want to make sure that it actually works. That's why we are software engineers. We want to ensure quality, right? I would look at the page. I want to verify that everything has been entered. Joseph is entered there. The drop down is there. We're looking for the data list and then file. So I'll step over.
I think the data list, you've not called the variable name. Something. So that side is drop down instead of data.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Thank you. That's correct. So I'm going to drag this back, yeah, and save the changes. And then if I step over and step over again, if you look on the page, can you see Chicago is there now? And the next thing I want to do is to use the file. Now, that's what happens most times when you do copy and paste. You forget small little things. So if I step over here again, initially before I step over, nothing has been added to the file right here. And then I'm just going to do a quick step over and go over to the page again. Can you see that file.txt has been uploaded, right? So I will finish off the test. Then I'll quickly show you how you can do that to work on any machine. So what you want to do is, let me comment this out. I'm going to put, create a variable. I'll say var paths equals directory dot get parent, and inside the get parents method, you want to add another directory dot get current directory, and we are going to do a dot parent at the end, and I'll explain to you why I'm doing each step I'm taking. Actually, before I do that, now directory.getParent, what it is doing is it's a method that has been created by Microsoft to identify the parent folder of the current location that you've specified. And which location have we specified? This location right here, directory.getCurrentDirectory, meaning it's going to go straight to the root folder of our project. And where is the root folder of our project? I will show you right now. So remember that the name of our project is called Masterclass Test Automation, right? If I double click, and the root folder is going to be seated right inside of the bin debug net 8.0. Remember when we created the project, we selected net 8.0, right? So right in here is the root folder of your project. Now, the reason why it's the root folder of your project is because this is where all the DLL files, the executables are. So at runtime, every package or every nugget that has been added in here as a dependency gets executed from here. Okay, so that's what makes it your root folder. Now, the code you're seeing right here, which says directory.getCurrentDirectory, it's going to identify this this URL part of your folder. or let's call it the folder path. So this one right here, this is what you're going to see. And I'll copy that and put it right here for you to see. Okay, so this is this in a nutshell. Now, when we say directory.getParent, what will happen is it's going to move you from this folder net 8.0 and move you into the debug folder. I hope this makes sense. So it's going to basically remove this net 8.0. By doing this manually, what we want to do is to click on the arrow and go from net 8.0 back to the debug folder. You can see now we are in debug folder. So I'll copy it again, and this is what it's going to look like. And then if we put another dot parent here, it's going to do exact same thing, just like calling the same method again by removing the debug folder and taking it up one level to the bin folder. Okay, so we are going to see something like this, up one level, and you see the debug folder, and this would be the folder path. And then if you put another dot parent, it's going to do the exact same thing again, remove the bin, come right here in the folder, go one up level. And since the folder we are looking for, where we have saved our file, it's seated inside of the test data, we now know that using this folder path, we are going to get to the point where our test data folder is. So the next thing we want to do is to either use what is called paths.combine, or we can make it as easy as possible. You know what? Let me show you. Let me do this. So right here, you can say plus and put a double quote, and the name of the folder that we are looking for is called test data. So you put a plus, double quotes, and you say test data. And the file we are looking for is seated inside of this test data called file, and the format is txt. So what you want to do again is put a double backward slash and put file.txt, meaning the double folder is from this folder called test data, go inside of the folder and identify a file called file.txt. So the whole of this code now will automatically get me that file, and I will now be able to use it and upload it directly on the page. So doing it this way, anyone who uses it or who runs the code will be able to grab that file from their own machine. So it won't be a problem, you know, compared to the way we've done it before. So what we'll do now is run the test so that we can see how this is done. I'll put a breakpoint. Okay, I have a breakpoint there. I'll right click and debug. So our browser has opened and it has stopped at the breakpoint. So nothing has been uploaded yet. And what you want to do now is step over. So if I step over, select Chicago from the drop-down, identify the file, and I'm going to step over on line 33. And if you hover your mouse on paths, which is this variable called paths, hover your mouse on it, it's going to tell you the exact results that we got from the code we wrote. So it says C user and all the way up to the file. Can you see how it joined them up? Now, the only problem here, if you look here carefully, the only problem here is that the master class test automation folder and the actual test data folder, there is no demarcation between both of them. So we were meant to have started putting // here. So if I drag this debug point back and I step over again, and if you hover your mouse on path now, can you see there is now a separation between masterclass test automation folder and test data? So it looks perfectly complete now, and we can go ahead and upload our file. So I step over, go over to the page. Can you now see the file has been uploaded? So if I give you this project now for you to run on your machine, it's going to work 100%. I hope this makes sense. And now on to the next one. Let me quickly finish off this test. On to the next one, you can also use your code to identify, like select a date from a date picker, or you can select, move the slider up and down. This one is an interesting one. Let's see if we can get this to work. So the first thing I want to do is identify this locator. And it says we have a name here. So I'm going to copy that name first. Before I do that, let me quickly copy one of this code and put it here. And then I want to call this slider. And I want to identify the component by name so that I will paste the locator there. Okay, so that has been sorted. And the next thing I want to do is to try to move the slider from point A to point B. Now, how do you do that? Selenium may have their own ways of doing that, but then I believe there's quite a few different ways you can do this. One of the ways you can do it is using what is called action class. Another way you can do it is using what is called JavaScript executor. JavaScript executor is the one I'm going to use right now, just to make things a lot faster, because action class, sometimes you have to try different things before you can make it work. So to use JavaScript executor, what I'm going to do is declare the object of JavaScript executor. I'll type JavaScript executor. Actually, it's called iJavaScript executor. And I'll call it JS equals iJavaScript executor. And I want it to use the driver. And then from there, I'm going to use the variable JS to execute a script. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know some of these things? Well, there is a whole lot of information out there of people who's done it before. And by doing it over and over again, I've been able to memorize majority of them, right? So that's the way it works. The more you use it, it sticks to your brain and you're able to remember it another day. So JS.execute script. And the first thing we want to do here is to put a double quote, and I want to put let's put a $sign here. And I want to write arguments 0. And I'll put .val of arguments 1. Now, what does this mean? Argument 0 is pointing at the actual object itself, which is this range object, while the what's it called? The other one, argument 1, is going to be pointing at the value which I am going to be setting the range at. So I'll put a dot change here, meaning I want to change the value. And I believe you have a bracket after that and put a semicolon. And then you want to specify which elements you want to, so the element is your object. So which element we want to manipulate, and that's called slider. So that's the element we've declared here. And the variable is called slider. So I'm going to put it here, and then I will put a comma after that, and I want to set a value. Now, if you look at it carefully, it's currently sitting pretty much like in the middle. So if I want to drag it backwards, I'm going to be setting a number from 0 to a specific range, let's say 0 to 5. But then if I want to move it to the right, I'm going to be setting a value higher than, let's say, 5, something like that. So here, I'm just going to put, let's say, 2. I want to move it backward, for instance. Let's see if this works. It's been a while I did this. Yeah, right, cool. I'll put a breakpoint here in line 37, and I'll run the test in debug mode. So the browser is opened, and we can see everything has been entered. So we are only waiting to interact with the range knob. So if I step over to identify the locator or the element on the page, it looks like it's identified it, hence why there is no errors. And on line 38, I'm going to initialize the object of iJavaScript executor. And if I step over, and now if I try to actually, let me move it right here so that we can see it. So if I try to do a step over, okay, I'm getting error. I'm getting error. It says arguments 0.val is not a function. Interesting. That should be correct. Let's see what we are missing. You know what? Let's use ChatGPT. It's always there to help us refactor this code. So slider.val change. Okay. So ChatGPT is suggesting that I should use it this way. So I'm going to paste it right here. So something like that. I don't see anything different in what I've done. Slider.val. Okay. value. Okay, so let's try this one and see. I'll put a breakpoint here again. Right click. Debug. Okay, so if I step over, and now I step over, still throwing error, slider, values name function. Okay. So arguments 0, that's the one. Change the value dot change. Okay, you know what? I might have something somewhere. Yeah, that's correct now. So what is it complaining about? Okay, cool. I will replace this one. JS slider. So I want to set it to 2. Cool. I'll run that again. So some of these lines of code, sometimes they can be, you will need to play with them quite a bit to be able to get it right. So yes, we're about to select now, and voila, that's working now. So can you see it moved it from here to there? I'll do that again. So if I change the value to, let's say, something like 8, save the changes, drag it up, and if I do a step over here, can you see it moved it all the way to the right? And I can drag it all the way to the left-hand side by putting 0 here. And if I drag that again, 1 second, where is it? All right, so I'll do that again. Step over and drag it all the way. Can you see that? So that worked perfectly fine. Let's finish off the test. So this is how you can use Selenium to control or manipulate a browser. Now, I did say earlier on that what if you were asked to use one particular element to interact with a few different elements or components on the page? And the reason why we want to do that sometimes is we want to reduce a lot of codes. As you can see, we've got so many of them right now. Now, how do you do this? I'm going to duplicate this unit test. So I'll copy all of them, and then I will paste them here again. So I'll say test2 here. And then what I want to do is to identify a locator that will help me cut down on some of this so we can reduce them drastically. So this will bring me to being able to use one of this. We've been using ID and name. Now, there's a few resources out there, tutorials that will tell you more about locator strategy. But the locator I'm going to use right now is called Expert. We can also use CSS Selector, but let me use Expert so that you can see what it looks like. So this is where we are combining the tag name, we are combining it with the attributes and the attribute value. So if I open the browser again and I go over to here, and I'm just going to try and identify one of them again. And what we are looking for right here is similarities between each of the components. And I can quickly tell you now that one of the similarities between each of the components is where it says class equals form control. How do I know? So if I collapse this tag name, collapse this one, can you see right here? As I'm hovering my mouse, can you see what it is identifying? Also, if I collapse it all the way to the div, you can see there is 3 different sections when they were creating this page. There's 3 different sections. So inside the first one, we do have a couple of labels, and the labels has a class form label. Now, if I go inside of that label, I have a class here called form control. If I go to the second one, there is another class form control. If I go to the third, there is another form control. So that's what I need. Hence why I'm going to copy this class equals form control, and the formula that I need for identifying an expert is this. It's going to start with a // tag name. I told you what a tag name is, and you put a square bracket and you say at attributes name equals attributes value. And this is the base formula for an expert. Now, CSS Selector is pretty much similar in its own way, but not 100%. Now, if you want to learn more about CSS Selector, please go online and dig out more information on that. Because of our time, we are just going to carry on here. So if I use this formula right now on the page to identify the locator we are talking about, this is what we'll see. I'll hold my Control F to open the Finder area at the bottom, and I'll paste that formula. And we want to now start replacing each of these things with what we are seeing in the HTML DOM. So the tag name here, we are looking for, what's the tag name where the class form control is? The tag name is called input. So I'm going to replace tag name here. I'll replace it with input. The attribute name, if you trace it up from input, the attribute name that we are looking for is class. So type is an attribute name, class is an attribute name is an attribute, ID is an attribute, but the attribute we're interested in is class. So I'm going to replace attribute name here with class. And the value, I'm going to replace the value here with form control. And I want to put this, wrap it around 2 single quotes. And can you see, immediately I pasted form control, which is the attribute value. It tells me that I am identifying 7 elements on the page, right? And if I press enter on my keyboard, can you see it is identifying all 7 of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So that's exactly what I need. I'm going to copy it and now go over to Visual Studio. And what I want to do right here is say iWeb element, and I'll say list of elements, something like that. And I'll say driver dot find an element, and I want to say by dot by dot expert this time around instead of ID or name, and I'll paste the locator there. Right. Now, this is the usual way we've been doing it with the rest of the elements. But the slight difference here is that we want to find more than one element. And as a result of that, Selenium has created a method to find multiple elements. So if you think about it this way, find elements is one single element, while find elements with an S will help you to identify multiple elements. Okay? Remember, we're talking about collections yesterday. This is where collections come in as one of the fundamentals of any programming language that you're going to learn. And then because we are trying to find multiple elements, can you see we have an error? And the reason is because the return type or the objects that we have over here is only going to be able to receive one single element. But if we want it to receive multiple elements, we are going to convert it into either an iRead-only collection or a list, and whatever you want to use. There's a few different ones out there. Or the most basic one that a lot of people use is to just use the keyword var. Var can mimic or can hold a single value. It can also hold multiple values. But if you want to do it the right way, just so that someone knows exactly what object you're trying to use, you can just do something like this. Let's say iRead-only collection, and you paste your iWeb elements in there. Can you see we don't have any more errors, right? So with this variable of this list of elements right now, what we are going to do is to use the variable and start identifying all these elements or interacting with all these elements. So I'll comment out line 59 and I'll use this list of elements. And because it's a collection, we now need to identify either the first index or the second index or the third index of the collection. Sorry, Owen, I'm going to come to you in a minute. So either you want to identify the first index or the second index of the collection before we can actually use it properly. And the first index is the one we are looking for right here, because if you look on the list, you see it identified 7 of them. So the very first one is this one right here. Can you see? That's the first one. That's the one it is identifying. Hence, you want to do something like this. Dots, either you use the keyword first or default. Both of them are doing the exact same thing. Alternatively, you want to put an index here to say index of 0, something like that. It's not like an index of 0. 1 second. So, okay. Let's go ahead and just use first so we don't waste time. And then you have something like this, right? And from identifying the first index, you are now going to type into the first index. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other ones. I'll comment out this line of code and I'll replace it with this. Now, the only difference with the second one is that we are not trying to identify the first index. We want to identify the second index. As a result, we are going to use element at, because there is no such thing as second. We don't have a method called second or third or fourth. So what we have is element at. And the element at, since in programming language, the very first on the list of a collection in programming language is 0. So this by default is identifying the first one, which is 0 in programming language. And then if we're going to be using element at, we want to pass 1 here to identify the second one. I hope this makes sense. 1 identifies the second one. And I'll go ahead, and I don't think the locator helps us to identify text area. Let's see. So if I go to the second one and the third one, can you see it did not identify the text area? So we're going to leave the text area the way it is, because I feel like there's a different locator that can work for that one. So there's something here in the text area. I can see class. Oh, okay. So it's because we have text area as the tag name as opposed to input. So which we can actually change. We can remove input here and replace it with asterisk. Now you can now see that by removing the exact name of the tag name and replacing it with asterisk, it is identifying more than the specified tag name. So initially we had 7, but now we have 8 in total, which then allows us to identify text area. Can you see? So I'm going to copy this one and I'll replace, in fact, I'll just replace it here. And then I can go ahead to comment out the text area here, and I'll replace it with element at, which I will now specify 2. And if I go to the next one, so the fourth one will now be disable inputs, which I don't need to do anything with because we are not interacting with it at all. The fifth, the sixth, so the sixth one is data list. Drop down is not being identified. So I'll go to data list on here. I'll comment that out and I'll replace it with, what number is it here? So it's the 6th one. So the 6th one will now be 5. And what's the next one? So file will now be the 7th. So this file right here, I'll comment it out and I'll replace it here. And the index will now be 6 right here, and so on. So let me just get rid of all these commented lines. Okay, just to keep a clean code in there. And now let's run it and see what's happening. Then I'll allow you to ask your question, Owen. So you can now see that we have 2 tests available here now as opposed to 1. So I'll be running, in fact, let me put a breakpoint so that we can see everything being actioned one after the other. So I'll right click and debug. And then I'm going to start stepping over one by one as soon as it hits the breakpoint. Okay, so the browser has opened and we now want to start interacting. If we step over, because it's the first index, we can just step over and you see that it's typed my name in there. And the next one we want to interact with is the password. If I step over, you see password has been entered. And the third one is the text area. If you verify that, it has typed welcome everyone. And then onto the drop down. So we are still retaining the drop down a line of code, no changes. Then onto the data list, we're going to step over. If you verify that, that has been entered. And next is the file. So I'm going to step over and verify that. Can you see the file has been uploaded? And finally, we are going to move this slider. So now you can see that we have managed to So let's verify the slider. That's it right there. We've managed to make all of them work or manipulate them one after the other. And obviously, it made our life a lot more easier. Instead of adding multiple, what's it called? Multiple locators in, we are using one locator, and that's this one locator up here to perform all the actions that we want to perform on the page. Yes, please, Owen, if you could ask your question now.
Okay, yeah. I was just gonna ask, why did you parameterize that locator since it's got multiples?
No.
So why did you not parameterize it so that you can use just one for everything instead of
Yes.
doing it this way?
Okay, I don't need to parameterize it. There are so many ways you can use an expert locator. Now, the only thing I'm interested in is for it to identify each and every element individually from that one locator. And that's what I've done. So if I want to parameterize it, I'm trying to do, functional experts where I want to identify specific locators by the parameterized value which I want to use. Now, that's absolutely fine as well. But this, if you put this in a page object, it goes a long way to just help you identify multiple values. If you want to parameterize that, you have to figure out what value you want to use to parameterize. So let's take, for instance, you have a text input here. So the locator we are looking at right here, let's say the very first one, you can see it right here. There is a text input here. Now, if you want to put the text input, you can put it as the first one to say, contains text or text is equal to so and so. And to me, that's, messing things up a little bit, which it's not necessary. If you can do it as easy as possible, I feel like this is the best way that you can do that without making a mess of your locators. If you obviously want to do it that other way, please feel free to do it like that. All right. In terms of parameterization, I prefer to parameterize only when I have added all my locators in the page object, and I can use it from there. Now, time is not on our side. Let's quickly get into the last thing that I wanted to show us today. Now, are there any other questions before we continue? Also online, if there is any questions. Nope. If there's no questions, let's go ahead to finish off what we want to do next. Now, if I copy this unit test again and duplicate it for the third time, and I'll change this to 3. All right, so this is the third test. So what we've been doing here is unit test 1, unit test 2, and test 3. Now, what if you are trying to not expose the data that you want to send in your test automation? Now, majority of this can be done as easy as possible using things like the resource file or JSON file or database or Excel spreadsheet. Now, before the training started, I've gone ahead to download MySQL Workbench, which is a lightweight version of a database that has been installed on my machine. If you can see it right here, this is it here, MySQL Workbench. I've installed that, and I've gone ahead to add data to match the the fields that we are trying to interact with. So if you look right here, we have the URL here, we have the text input, we have the password, text area, drop down, data list, and range. Now, what do I want to do with this? I just want to like use data that are coming from an external source. And to be able to do that, the first thing you want to do, obviously, install a MySQL. And the second thing you want to do is to set your password after installing the MySQL Workbench. You also set your environment variables, which there's quite a lot. This will take a separate class for me to walk you through, downloading, setting it up, and then writing the code that will help you make a connection between your code and the database. So another thing that I did was to go ahead and set the environment variables. So if you go to the environment variables and type environment variables and click on, I believe it's paths, and right here, can you see I have set my MySQL server folder paths in here. And then after that, I went over to Visual Studio, and in my Solution Explorer, I looked for an API package, which I installed in here. And then the next thing I did was I tried out a few different ones. Initially, I wanted to try MySQL Server, but then I went ahead with Workbench. And then what I have created here is a new class. So to create a new class, you want to right click and go to add and class. That will create a new class for you. And then this is what the new class looks like. So in this new class, I've gone ahead to create a connection string. So my connection string here is that I'm connecting to a local server on my laptop. And that local server requires a user ID, which is root, and then a password, PWD. And this is my password to my database. And then this is the database that I'm connecting to, AutoTestDB. If I go back to my database, you will see there is a name here called AutoTestDB. And then after that, I wrote a method, which is an IEnumerable, where my return type is an IEnumerable dictionary of string and objects, where I'm able to now store all the data which I am retrieving from the database. I'm saving them inside of a dictionary. So this dictionary right here, everything that I'm retrieving right here is being saved inside of this dictionary. And after saving all the data in the dictionary, so that implies that all these data here, row 1 and row 2, will be saved in my dictionary. And when I save it, I'm going to now use this line of code right here. I can use them to retrieve all the information that I need from the database. So I'm going to say var, you know what, let me just paste that there. And I'm just going to say var reader equals dbconnect.get table data. And this table data that I'm trying to get, obviously I need to write a query, which is an SQL statement to select all data from the database. So I've added select all from web form. That is the table name called web form. If I go back to the database again, so that's the database name, and you can see on that table, this is the table name web form. And what is inside of the table is these two rows. Hence why by running select all from autotestdb.webform will give me all this information. And that's exactly what I'm replicating here in this code. And the first thing you will notice, actually, let me move that to the top. The first thing you will notice is because I have my URL also inside of what's it called? inside of the database, I can actually read my data, my URL like this. So if I copy that, and where I'm doing a navigate, where's that again? I can paste it right here, like that. So the URL that I'm navigating to is not visible to everyone. I'm sorry, it's already time. I'm going to wrap up shortly now. The URL that I'm about to navigate to, it's no longer visible to us, but you know, this is how you can hide certain data away from a lot of people, especially when this code is going to be pushed to the repository. And then I can go ahead and use this exact same line of code by changing the index. I can start entering the other data that you're seeing here. So the second data that we are going to retrieve here is the text input, and that's seated in index of 1. So sorry, index of 2. So I'm just going to copy this and I will place it right here. And I'll change this to 2. Let's just quickly test it to make sure that it is working before we go ahead and make changes to the rest of them. So index of 2, which is hello Selenium. And I'll put a breakpoint right here and quickly run the tests in debug mode. I believe for some of the people that already have some understanding of automation, and the people who attended my class, I have showed you how to use a resource file, JSON file, Excel spreadsheet, and this might be the first time you're seeing the database. So a browser has opened, and now we want to, you can see that it navigated to the browser by retrieving the data directly from the database. And if I hover my mouse on the reader, can you see right here, we have 2 sets of record. And then if I go to index of 1, you can see at index of 1 here, you can see we have a URL, which is everything inside of the database is coming through perfectly fine, all from one method right here. So if I then go ahead and step over and try to execute the next line of code, and that has been completed. And can you see there, we have hello Selenium. So this is now data driven. We are using an external source to hold information and retrieving the information from that external source and passing it onto the web browser. And similarly, the same way we are retrieving data from the database right here, passing on the web browser, we can also save a new set of data into the database. This is where automation becomes even more interesting. So as you can see, there is quite a lot of things you can do in automation. I'm sorry, 1.5 hours is just too small to explain some of these things. But because it's a 3 days masterclass, which we are just only going to be touching on a few things. Tomorrow, we are going to be looking at spec flow for the first time. And what we are going to be doing in spec flow is to replicate the same thing that we've done here today. We're going to replicate it in spec flow to see how you can do it using a behavioral driven style automation framework. Now, are there any questions at this point? Any questions? Is it clear to everyone? Yes, Tammy.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to ask about, for example, in the iWeb element dropdown.
Yeah.
In the parameter, why did you add by.name? Why did you add by?
So iWeb elements drop down. Where is it? Okay, so from the previous one we did, right?
No, it was just there.
Okay. Which line is it? The drop down. Okay, this
Line
one.
102.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
the reason I added by.name is because that is the locator attributes that I want to use. Remember, if I go over to the page again and I identify this drop down. So initially you click on this little icon here and you hover your mouse on the elements or components that you want to interact with. And if I select it, can you see that it's highlighted the line inside of the HTML DOM? And can you see we have a tag name, an attribute called class, and there's another attribute called name here. So that name attribute and the value is what I'm using to identify the element. Hence why I have by.name here. And I'm pasting the exact value which I am saying on the page right there.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any more questions? Automation is very interesting, guys. If you are able to make it work, it's very exciting. And the moment you get things to work, you just keep doing it over and over. And despite the fact that it can be very interesting, it also comes with a lot of headaches. So I can only encourage you to make a start doing something. There is a lot of information out there to correct any errors or mistakes that you run into. So many information out there. And I'm always here myself to be of help to anybody who is struggling with anything. So tomorrow is our grand finale, where we're going to use SpecFlow BDD, which is going to look slightly different from what we've done today. So as you already know, we did unit test automation today, and tomorrow we'll do behavioral-driven test automation. So the reason why I want to showcase that part is because majority of companies today use BDD, and it would be nice for you to see how BDD works. So I will spend the very first minute of this training to start talking about BDD and start walking through creating the framework and making sure we can do this exact same thing inside there so that you can have a glimpse of it. And from there, maybe you can take it up from there. Any more questions? Okay, someone is saying, can you give us, a bit more explanation on how to create the database? Absolutely. I've just explained before. All you want to do is to download the database. So if you go to this website, I'll just copy it and paste the link there. So that's the link. All you want to do is click on, actually, 1 second. Yeah, this one, not that one. Hold on, not this one. So you want to click on this link. And then when you get to this link here, the second one is the one I downloaded, this second one right here. If you click on download, after downloading it, install it. And when you install it, actually, if you need any help with the installation, just let me know. If follow the installation steps, just go through. Majority of them are default. I think the only thing that I selected that is a little bit different is the very first selection, which is you're selecting custom as opposed to the other two options at the top, because I selected custom because I wanted to specifically know what I am doing to make sure it works the way I want it to work. So that's everything you need to do. If you follow it, install, and then after installing, to make the connection is very easy. It's just not too many lines of code. And trust me, you don't need to even understand so much of this. That's why we have ChatGPT as well. ChatGPT can help you, write out a code that you can just copy and use. And having said that, ChatGPT might be giving you a lot of expos, but you still need to have some understanding of how to make that code work, like put it together, make it work, and then make it do what you... I did this just, I think, half an hour before the training started. I was actually on call with someone else as well, who is actually on this call right now. And I quickly added it so that I can showcase that example. So that's it, guys. Let me not keep you too long. I hope you've learned something from today. If there is no more questions.
Joe, I just wanted to ask, is it necessary to download the MySQL or before you call it?
Yes, you have to obviously install the SQL
Okay.
yeah, before you can start doing anything that has to do with making a connection to the database and reading data.
Okay. But this is under what topic? Is it because
data driven.
Data driven. Yeah, data driven test. Sorry. What we did was test oriented. Is that right? Test driven. Yeah. Okay. So that was, I was a bit confused because I know sometimes they do test driven separately and data driven. When it comes, it's all a different game, isn't it? By rows, by table, isn't it, and stuff like that. So
that's right.
Quite advanced.
Yeah, no worries. Any more questions? Tammy, you have your hand up.
Yes, sorry. Please, could you explain what query is a bit more?
Oh, yes, good question. Query is just, let me just open the database. Can you see this line of code here?
Yes.
If you're trying to query something, what it means is that you're trying to search for a specific information within, let's say the database right now. I'm trying to search for a specific information from this database. So we use that word query. Also in our code, if I go back to the unit test, if you notice, I am using a method called first. We can actually query, or by using the method first, we are querying the first information of a collection by using that method first. That means I want to say I am not interested in the second option, the third option, the fourth. I'm only interested in the first one. So that's me querying the collection to only focus on the first one. There's even a lot more you can do by, there's another method called first or default. And then some people even query things further by doing something like this. And they say X dots, you find another element from the list. So remember, because it's an I-read-only collection, since it's a collection of information, I can go ahead and start looking for more information from within that collection. So that's where we use the word query. But in database, we just say query because we are writing a set of commands that will help us to retrieve those informations that we are looking for by identifying the table. So when they say select all, this asterisk means all. We're using the keyword select, and we say all from this database name, AutoTestDB. So that's the database name. And then there's a dot between the AutoTestDB and web form. Web form is now the table. So I'm saying select everything from the web table and give me a display of the result. That's you doing a query. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any more questions, please? If there's no more questions, let's call it a day, and tomorrow will be even more fun. Please tell a friend to tell a friend. Let's someone be motivated. It's at the end of 2024. You can use this as a motivation to kickstart your 2025.
Yeah, that's the hope, Joseph. It's not a joke. this automation thing is a heavy weight too. We've got to put our soul in it, you know.
Yeah. No worries. Okay. Thank you
we
very
will
much.
get the recording, isn't it, Joe?
Yes.
Okay.
I will send that.
Use the weekdays to go over all the 3 days we've done, isn't it?
Yep.
And
no worries.
Do something.
Thank you very much, everyone. And have a lovely evening. See you tomorrow.